Philadelphia smelled like rain and exhaust that October evening when Marcus Webb pushed through the revolving doors of Sterling Global Holdings at 5:47, 17 minutes before his night shift officially began. The lobby gleamed with polished marble that cost more per square foot than Marcus earned in a month, and he kept his eyes down as he crossed toward the service elevator, the one tucked behind a potted fern where clients never saw the janitors come and go. His gray uniform bore the Sterling logo over his heart, a silver S that caught the recessed lighting as he walked, making him visible for exactly 3 seconds before shadows swallowed him again. The sixth-floor changing room smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. Marcus spun the combination lock on locker 7, pulled out his supply cart, and checked the inventory sheet clipped to the handle. 22 floors tonight, executive suites on 17. Boardroom on 22 needed a deep clean before tomorrow's quarterly presentation. He glanced at the photo taped inside his locker door. Emma, 7 years old, gap-toothed smile, holding up a drawing of a stick-figure man with a mop. "My hero daddy," scrawled across the top in purple crayon. Marcus closed the locker and wheeled his cart toward the freight elevator. The fluorescent lights above flickered twice, then steadied. His reflection in the steel doors showed a man who'd turned 35 in December, dark circles under his eyes from working 6 nights a week, shoulders that hadn't fully relaxed since Charlotte left 3 years ago, with nothing but a note saying she couldn't do this anymore. The elevator groaned upward. 17, 18, 19, 22. Victoria Sterling stood at the head of the glass conference table on the 22nd floor, laser pointer drawing red circles around quarterly profit margins projected on the screen behind her. 9 directors occupied the chairs lining both sides of the table, laptops open, ceramic mugs from the company's Italian espresso machine steaming quietly. Richard Grayson sat closest to Victoria, his silver hair perfectly trimmed, his Patek Philippe watch catching the overhead lights as he tapped notes into his tablet. Sarah Chen checked her phone under the table. Tom Bradford stifled a yawn behind his fist. The numbers on the screen showed a 34% increase in profit margins compared to last quarter. Victoria's voice carried the particular authority that came from inheriting a $4 billion company at 36 and spending 2 years proving she deserved to keep it. Her father had built Sterling Global from a regional logistics firm into an international powerhouse before his heart gave out at 68. Everyone said Victoria inherited his drive but lacked his warmth, as if warmth had anything to do with quarterly earnings. Her words stopped mid-sentence. The laser pointer slipped from her fingers, clattered against the table, rolled off the edge. Her right hand moved to her chest, pressing hard against her sternum like she could physically push back whatever was crushing her from the inside. The room tilted, or maybe she tilted. Her knees buckled, and the marble floor rushed up to meet her face, and then there was nothing but the sound of 9 chairs scraping back at once. Sarah Chen's voice cracked like glass. Tom Bradford was already pulling out his phone, fingers hovering over 911 but not pressing it yet, as if waiting for confirmation that this was real and not some elaborate drill. Richard Grayson stood frozen with both hands flat on the table, his face the color of old newspaper. Victoria lay on her side, one arm folded beneath her, her lips beginning to shade from pink to something darker. Marcus heard the shouting through the door while he was refilling the soap dispensers in the executive bathroom 3 doors down. He abandoned his cart and ran, his boots squeaking against the polished floor. The boardroom door stood open. 9 people clustered around something on the floor, none of them moving, all of them shouting over each other. He pushed through the wall of expensive cologne and imported perfume. Victoria Sterling wasn't breathing. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her, his hand going automatically to her neck, 2 fingers pressing against the carotid artery. Nothing. He tilted his head down, ear close to her mouth and nose. No breath sounds, no chest rise. He looked up at the 9 directors staring down at him. The words came out steady even though his heart was trying to punch through his ribs. "She's in cardiac arrest. I'm trained in CPR." Richard Grayson's voice came down from above like judgment. "You're a janitor. Step back." Marcus ignored him. He'd taken the CPR certification course 8 years ago when he was 26 and still thought he'd finish his nursing degree, back when Charlotte was pregnant with Emma, and the future looked like something other than night shifts and ramen dinners. The instructor's voice echoed across the years. "If they're not breathing, You are their lungs. If their heart stops, you are their heart. Everything else is just noise. He tilted Victoria's head back, pinched her nose shut, and gave 2 rescue breaths. Her chest rose. Good. He locked his hands together over her sternum and began compressions. 1, 2, 3. The count steadied him. Did 10, leaving 12. His arms burned. 23, 24. Someone grabbed his shoulder from behind, yanking hard enough to knock him off balance. Sarah Chen's voice hit a pitch that could shatter crystal. Oh my God, he's kissing her! Tom Bradford swung something, an umbrella from the coat stand, connecting hard with Marcus's back. Pain bloomed across his spine like spilled gasoline catching fire. He kept counting. 28, 29, 30. 2 more breaths, chest compressions again. Richard Grayson's hands closed around his shoulders, trying to haul him backward, but Marcus was stronger than he looked, and terror made him immovable. The words came out between compressions, punctuated by the rhythm that kept Victoria's blood moving through her body. If I stop, she dies. He lost track of how many cycles he completed. 3, maybe 4. His vision started to blur at the edges. Someone hit him again, this time across the shoulders. He tasted copper. Everything narrowed to the count, the compression depth, the angle of her airway. Then Victoria's body jerked beneath his hands. She coughed once, hard, like she was trying to expel the ocean. Her chest heaved. Air rushed into her lungs with a sound like resurrection. Marcus fell backward, his spine hitting the leg of the conference table. His hands were numb. His back felt like raw meat. Victoria's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, searching the ceiling for answers that weren't there. The sirens were already close, growing louder. Someone had called 911 after all. The paramedics swept in with practiced efficiency, oxygen mask, backboard, questions fired in rapid succession. The older one, gray stubble and kind eyes, looked down at Marcus still sitting on the floor. You do the SEEB? Marcus nodded. Good work. You kept her brain alive. Richard Grayson waited until the paramedics had lifted Victoria onto the stretcher and wheeled her toward the elevator before he spoke. His voice had the temperature of liquid nitrogen. Your name? Marcus pulled himself upright using the edge of the table. His legs shook. Marcus Webb, employee 4721, night shift. You just put your mouth on the CEO of this company without her consent. The words felt like they were coming from underwater. She wasn't breathing. CPR requires rescue breaths. I had to. That wasn't your decision to make, Mr. Webb. Richard's face could have been carved from marble. Leave the building immediately. HR will contact you within 24 hours. If you speak to media about this incident, we will pursue legal action. Security will escort you out. 2 guards Marcus didn't recognize appeared at his elbows. Not Frank Wilson, who worked the main entrance and sometimes shared cigarettes with Marcus during their 15-minute breaks. These were younger men with harder faces, the kind who'd worked private military before taking corporate security jobs that paid better and required less moral flexibility. Marcus picked up his abandoned mop bucket from where he'd left it in the hallway. The 9 directors watched him go with expressions ranging from disgust to fear to nothing at all. Nobody said thank you. Nobody said anything. The elevator doors closed on their silence. Frank Wilson caught him at the service entrance, confusion and anger competing for control of his weathered face. Marcus, what the hell happened up there? Marcus's throat felt like someone had poured sand down it. I saved her life, Frank. Then why are they throwing you out? Because I'm not supposed to touch people like her. Frank opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. They both knew the truth when they heard it. Marcus pushed through the door into the October drizzle, and the city swallowed him whole. The apartment in West Philadelphia smelled like the neighbors cooking and the slow leak under the kitchen sink that the landlord kept promising to fix. Marcus's key stuck in the lock the way it always did. Emma met him at the door in her pink nightgown, bare feet slapping against the linoleum, her face crumpling when she saw him 3 hours early. Daddy, why are you home? Did something happen? The lie came automatically, the same lie he'd been telling Emma since she was old enough to ask questions. Just finished work early tonight, baby. Nothing to worry about. Ruth Martinez looked up from the sofa where she'd been reading a romance novel with a shirtless man on the cover. Her eyes went from Marcus's face to his soaked uniform to the way he was holding himself like someone had driven a spike between his shoulder blades. Marcus. He shook his head once, sharp. Not in front of Emma. Ruth understood. She'd been watching Emma on Marcus's night shifts for 2 years, ever since Charlotte lost custody and disappeared into whatever hole people crawled into when their addiction finally won. Ruth asked for nothing in return except company and someone to remind her that the world still had decent people in it. After Emma fell asleep, Marcus peeled off his shirt in the bathroom and twisted to see his back in the mirror. The bruise bloomed purple and black across his left shoulder blade, the size of a man's fist. Or an umbrella handle. He pressed his fingers against it, and the pain flared white-hot, stealing his breath. Nothing broken, just meat and bone protesting violence. He lay in bed next to Emma, listening to the radiator clank and wheeze, watching the streetlight outside paint shadows across the water-stained ceiling. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Victoria Sterling's face gone slack and pale, heard Sarah Chen screaming about assault, felt the umbrella connecting with his spine. His good deed played on loop behind his eyelids until he gave up on sleep entirely and watched the numbers on his phone tick toward dawn. The email arrived at 9:07 the next morning. Subject line in all caps. Immediate termination. Employee number 4721. Marcus read it 3 times, each word hitting like a separate punch. Inappropriate conduct. Senior personnel. Final decision. No appeal. His final paycheck would arrive by mail. He was prohibited from entering Sterling premises or contacting any Sterling employees. The signature at the bottom belonged to someone named Jennifer Kwan in Human Resources, a person Marcus had never met and who had just erased 7 months of his life with a form letter. He called the HR number listed in the email. A woman answered on the 4th ring, her voice professionally pleasant in the way that meant she didn't care about anything beyond her lunch break. "This is Marcus Webb. I received a termination email. There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, Mr. Webb. I was doing CPR. The CEO wasn't breathing. I saved her life. Security footage has been reviewed. The decision is final." His hand tightened around the phone. "Can I see the footage?" "That's confidential company property. This call is over." The line went dead. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone like it might offer answers. But phones never did. Ruth found him there 20 minutes later. Emma at school, the apartment silent except for the refrigerator's irregular hum. "What happened?" The words came out flat, drained of inflection. "They fired me." Ruth's face went through several expressions in rapid succession before settling on fury. "For saving someone's life? For touching someone I wasn't supposed to touch." By noon, the story had metastasized across the internet. A blog called Philly Insider Scoop published a grainy screenshot from what looked like security camera footage. Marcus bent over Victoria Sterling, his face close to hers, the angle and lighting making it look like something other than CPR. The headline screamed, "Janitor caught in compromising position with unconscious female CEO." The article mentioned inappropriate contact, termination for cause, sources inside Sterling Global. It mentioned everything except the truth. Twitter picked it up within an hour. Reddit created 3 separate threads, each one a bonfire of speculation and righteous anger. Local news channels ran segments about workplace safety and liability. The comments sections filled with people who'd never met Marcus Webb but knew everything they needed to know from a single blurry image and a headline designed to generate clicks. Frank Wilson texted at 2:15. "Bro, people are saying crazy stuff online. I know the truth. Stay strong." Marcus didn't respond. He sat on the couch reading comment after comment, each one a small knife finding the spaces between his ribs. Some people defended him. Most didn't. The truth didn't matter. The image did. The narrative did. The fact that he was a janitor and she was a billionaire CEO did. Emma came home from school with her backpack dragging on the ground and confusion written across her face. "Daddy, kids said you're on the news. Is that true?" Marcus knelt down until they were eye to eye. His daughter deserved better than lies, but she also deserved better than the full weight of human ugliness at age 7. "Something happened at work, baby. People are saying things that aren't true. But I want you to know I didn't do anything wrong. I helped someone who needed help." Emma's arms went around his neck, her voice muffled against his shoulder. I believe you, Daddy. The phone rang at 2:07 on Thursday afternoon, a number Marcus didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. Charlotte's voice hit him like ice water. Marcus, I saw the news. He hadn't heard from his ex-wife in 11 months, not since the family court judge told her she'd need 18 months of documented sobriety before they'd even consider visitation rights. Her voice sounded clearer than he remembered, less slurred, like maybe she actually had put down the pills. Charlotte, you're all over the internet. It's not what it looks like. I was doing CPR. Her laugh was sharp and bitter. I don't care what you were doing. You lost your job. That's what matters. I'll find another one. With this reputation, be serious. She took a breath. He heard traffic in the background. I'm filing for full custody of Emma. The floor dropped out from under him. He gripped the kitchen counter to stay upright. You can't. You lost custody 3 years ago. I've been clean 14 months. I have a go on you, an apartment, and proof of regular NA attendance. Her voice softened, almost gentle. And you're unemployed with a sexual assault allegation following you around. It's not an allegation. I saved someone's life. That's not what Google says. My lawyer thinks we have a strong case. You're using my good deed against me? I'm protecting my daughter from an unstable environment now. She's our daughter, and she's safe with me. The judge will decide that. See you in court, Marcus. The phone slipped from his hand, clattered against the linoleum. Ruth appeared in the doorway, a dishcloth twisted between her hands. Who was that? Charlotte. She's suing for custody. Ruth's face cycled through shock, rage, and something darker. That woman abandoned Emma when she was 4 years old. Doesn't matter. I'm unemployed. She's not. I have a scandal. She doesn't. Marcus slid down the cabinet until he was sitting on the floor. She's right. On paper, she looks like the better option. Emma emerged from her bedroom, her voice small and frightened. Was that Mommy? Marcus pulled his daughter onto his lap, felt her heart beating against his ribs like a trapped bird. Yeah, baby. Is she coming back? I don't know. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. I don't want to live with Mommy. I want to stay with you. Marcus pressed his face into her hair and lied through his teeth. I'll make sure you do, sweetheart. I promise. The job application stretched across 3 weeks like a bridge made of rejection letters. Metro Clean Services said they couldn't afford the liability. St. Mary's Hospital said their policy prevented hiring anyone with a termination for misconduct on their record, no matter the circumstances. Fresh Mart Grocery's assistant manager Googled Marcus's name right there during the interview, read the headlines, and said they'd decided to promote from within instead. Marcus kept count. 12 applications, 12 rejections. By the 3rd week, he'd memorized the exact expressions people made when they recognized his name. The slight widening of the eyes, the tightening around the mouth, the way they'd glance at the door like they were measuring the distance to safety. The eviction notice arrived on October 25th in a certified letter that required his signature. $2,400 owed, 2 months' rent, pay in full by November 10th, or vacate the premises. Court date November 15th if the matter remained unresolved. Marcus folded the letter and tucked it into the kitchen drawer with the other bills he couldn't pay. His savings account showed $347. He needed $2,400. The math didn't work no matter how many times he checked it. He sold his laptop for $180 to a pawn shop on Broad Street. The man behind the counter barely looked up from his racing form. Marcus's father's watch, the only thing he'd inherited when the old man died, brought $95 at a different pawn shop 2 blocks over. The watch had been cheap to begin with, but his father had worn it for 30 years, and it still kept time. Marcus walked out with cash in his pocket and a hole in his chest. Emma found out that night when she noticed the empty space on his wrist. Her eyes filled with tears, and Marcus couldn't lie his way out of this one. Daddy, where's Grandpa's watch? We needed groceries, baby. Grandpa would understand. Emma threw her arms around his waist and sobbed into his shirt. I don't need a lot of food. You can buy it back. Please. Marcus held her until she stopped shaking, whispering lies about how everything would be fine, how this was temporary, how things would get better. He'd gotten good at lying. It was one of the few skills poverty taught you that actually stuck. By the fourth week, Marcus was sleeping 3 hours a night and eating once a day to save food for Emma. His weight dropped 12 pounds. His hands started shaking when he tried to pour coffee. He'd stand up too fast and the world would tilt sideways, gray, creeping in from the edges of his vision. Ruth noticed. She always noticed. "When did you last eat a real meal?" "I had toast this morning." "Toast isn't food, Marcus. You're wasting away." She grabbed his arm, felt nothing but bone. "Emma needs a healthy father, not a martyr." He tried to tell her he was fine, but the words got stuck somewhere between his brain and his mouth. The kitchen floor came up to meet him, hard and fast. Emma's scream cut through the fin, Ruth's hands pressed against his neck, checking his pulse. He came back to himself 30 seconds later, tasting copper and shame. "You need a doctor." "Can't afford it. Insurance lapsed last week." Ruth made a sound in her throat like she wanted to hit something. "Then you need to eat. I'll bring food tomorrow and you'll eat it, or I'll force feed you myself." The family court hearing happened on November 8th, a Thursday morning that smelled like old wood and broken promises. Marcus wore Frank Wilson's suit, borrowed for the occasion, the shoulders too tight and the pants too short. He couldn't afford a lawyer. Charlotte arrived with Carson Miles, a man in a $2,000 suit who looked like he ate public defenders for breakfast. Judge Ellen Morrison, 60-something with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen every variation of human failure, called the court to order. Carson Miles stood up first, his voice smooth and confident. "Your Honor, my client Charlotte Reed has completed a certified rehabilitation program and maintains sobriety for 14 months. She attends weekly Narcotics Anonymous meetings and has secured stable employment at Longhorn Steakhouse, earning approximately $2,100 per month. She rents a 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood and is prepared to provide Emma with stability and structure." Then he turned his attention to Marcus, and his voice changed, sharpened. "Meanwhile, Mr. Webb was terminated from Sterling Global Holdings for inappropriate sexual conduct involving the CEO. He is currently unemployed, facing eviction, and unable to provide basic necessities. His daughter has been eating meals provided by neighbors out of charity. This is not a stable environment for a 7-year-old child." Marcus stood when the judge nodded at him. His hands shook. His voice came out steadier than he expected. "Your Honor, I saved Victoria Sterling's life. She had cardiac arrest. I performed CPR, which is a medical procedure, not misconduct. I was fired unjustly, and now I can't get hired because of false allegations that have spread across the internet." Judge Morrison looked at him over her reading glasses. "Do you have evidence of these false allegations?" "The security footage would prove it, but Sterling Global won't release it." Carson Miles barely suppressed a smirk. "Convenient excuse, Your Honor." The judge called Emma into chambers. Marcus watched his daughter walk in, small and scared, clutching her worn teddy bear. The bailiff closed the door. 5 minutes passed. 10. When Emma emerged, her face was streaked with tears. Judge Morrison took her time reviewing the files before she spoke. "This is a difficult case. Ms. Reed, your recovery is commendable, but 14 months is not a substantial track record. Mr. Webb, your current situation is deeply concerning. I'm not prepared to transfer custody today. However, I'm ordering a 60-day review period. Mr. Webb, you have until January 10th to secure stable employment and housing. If your situation hasn't improved by then, I will grant Ms. Reed's petition." Court adjourned. The gavel came down like a guillotine. 60 days. Marcus walked out of the courthouse with Frank Wilson waiting by his truck, the only person who'd offered to come. "How'd it go?" "I have 60 days to save my daughter." That night, Marcus sat on the apartment's tiny balcony, barely big enough for one person, and drank cheap beer from a can while Philadelphia stretched out below him. Sterling Tower blazed with light 40 blocks away, a monument to people who never worried about eviction notices or custody battles or whether they'd eat tomorrow. He'd saved one of those people, and they'd destroyed him for it. The thought came quietly, reasonably, like it made perfect sense. If he disappeared, Emma would go to Charlotte. Charlotte had a yasu, an apartment, stability. Emma would be fine, better than fine. She'd have a mother who could actually provide for her instead of a father who'd failed at everything except loving her. He looked down from the fourth floor, probably not high enough. The thought should have scared him. It didn't. His phone buzzed. Ruth's name on the screen. "Marcus, get home right now." Emma woke up crying. The beer can fell from his hand, clattering against the metal railing. "What? Is she okay?" "She had a nightmare. You arrogant. Come home." He ran. The apartment was 3 doors down, but he ran like the building was on fire. Emma sat on her bed, clutching her teddy bear, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her, pulling her into his arms. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Emma's voice came out in hiccups. "You left in my dream, like Mommy did. You walked away and you didn't come back." Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. "I will never leave you, Emma. Never. Even if the whole world turns against me, I'll always be your daddy. Promise?" "I promise on my life." She fell asleep in his arms. 40 minutes later, her breathing evening out into the rhythm of childhood and trust and a faith he didn't deserve. Marcus sat on the floor of her bedroom until dawn broke across Philadelphia, painting the sky gray, then pink, then blue. He'd thought about ending it tonight. Now he knew he never would. Emma needed him. That was enough. That had to be enough. 300 miles away in a penthouse that cost more per month than Marcus earned in a year, Victoria Sterling woke from a nightmare screaming. The same nightmare she'd had every night for 6 weeks. Drowning in darkness, lungs burning, everything fading to black. But tonight was different. Tonight she heard a voice cutting through the void, rough and desperate and absolutely certain. "Come on, breathe, come back." She sat up in bed, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. The clock read 3:14. The city slept below her, 40 floors of separation between her and the real world. She walked to the kitchen on legs that still felt unsteady, poured whiskey she didn't want, and stared out at Philadelphia's sleeping skyline. The doctors had told her the details. Sudden cardiac arrest, less than 8% survival rate without immediate intervention. Someone had performed CPR. Someone had saved her life. But nobody would tell her who. Richard kept saying it had been handled, that it was an internal matter, that she needed to focus on recovery rather than dwelling on one night. She pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over Richard's contact. 3:30 in the morning, she pressed call anyway. "Victoria?" His voice was thick with sleep and confusion. "Is everything all right?" "Who performed CPR on me?" "What? It's 3 in the morning. Answer the question, Richard." Silence, then. "It's been handled, an internal HR matter." "I didn't ask if it was handled. I asked who saved my life." "A janitor, night shift, but he was terminated for protocol violations." Victoria's hand tightened around her glass. "You fired the man who saved my life?" "It was necessary. He overstepped serious boundaries. HR and legal agreed." "Send me the security footage, every angle, by 9 a.m. "Victoria, I don't think that's..." Her voice dropped 20 degrees. "That wasn't a request, Richard. That was an order." She ended the call before he could respond. The whiskey burned going down, but it didn't touch the cold rage crystallizing in her chest. Someone had fought to keep her alive, and her company had destroyed them for it. She needed to see the truth with her own eyes. The email arrived at 8:47. One attachment, security footage Oct 17, boardroom.mp4. Victoria opened her laptop, the cursor hovering over the play button. Her hands shook. She pressed play. The footage showed her collapse in crystal clarity. The 9 directors frozen in their chairs. The door opening. A man in a gray janitor's uniform dropping his mop, running to her side. His hands checking her pulse, her breathing. The moment he started compressions, counting out loud, his face set with absolute focus. Richard Grayson pulling at his shoulders. Someone swinging an umbrella at his back. The janitor never stopping, never hesitating, even as they attacked him. Victoria watched the video 3 times. The 3rd time, she pressed pause on a frame showing the janitor's face clearly. Young, maybe mid-30s, dark hair, strong jaw, eyes that held the kind of determination that came from knowing what failure cost. She opened a new browser window and typed, "Janitor fired Sterling, Global October." The results loaded instantly. Headlines screamed about scandal and inappropriate conduct. Reddit threads dissected every angle. One blog post included a name, Marcus Webb. Victoria closed her laptop. Outside, Philadelphia was waking up. Cars on the streets, lights coming on in apartments. People heading to house they'd still have tomorrow. Somewhere in that city, Marcus Webb was waking up too, if he'd slept at all. The man who'd saved her life while 9 executives stood frozen. The man her CFO had fired and destroyed. She picked up her phone again. This time she called Daniel Park, head of security. "Miss Sterling?" Her voice was calm, controlled, the voice of someone who'd made a decision and wouldn't be talked out of it. "I need a full file on Marcus Webb, former night shift janitor, current address, employment history, everything. And Daniel, I want it within the hour." She ended the call and stood at her window, 40 floors above the city, and made a promise to a man who didn't know she existed. She would find him. She would fix this, even if it cost her everything. The file landed in Victoria's inbox at 9:37 on a Friday morning that felt like the first day of winter, even though November had 2 weeks left to run. Daniel Park had exceeded her request. 43 pages documenting every corner of Marcus Webb's life that could be reduced to data. Employment history at Sterling Global showed 7 months of perfect performance reviews. Not a single disciplinary note. 3 commendations for going above and beyond. Before Sterling, he'd worked for Metro Clean Services for 18 months until they downsized. Before that, a patchwork of jobs: grocery stock clerk, hospital orderly, delivery driver, the kind of resume that told a story about survival rather than ambition. Victoria scrolled to the personal section. Age 34. Daughter Emma, age 7, enrolled at West Philadelphia Elementary. Ex-wife Charlotte Reed, custody revoked 3 years prior following substance abuse issues. Current address, 2247 Kensington Avenue, apartment 4B. Monthly rent, $1,200, 2 months overdue. Eviction proceedings active. She pulled up the security footage again, this time watching Marcus's face instead of the medical procedure. The determination burned there like a pilot light that refused to go out no matter how hard the wind blew. He'd taken 4 direct hits. She counted them this time, slowing the playback, and kept working. Richard had physically dragged him backward, and he'd wrenched free. Sarah Chen had screamed about assault loud enough to be heard through the camera's audio, and he hadn't even looked up. Victoria picked up her office phone, punched in the number listed under Marcus Webb's contact information. The automated voice informed her the number had been disconnected. She tried again, got the same message. Of course, utilities got cut when you couldn't pay rent. Her intercom buzzed. Richard Grayson's voice came through crisp and professional. "Victoria, do you have a moment? We need to discuss the quarterly projections." "Come in." Richard entered with a leather portfolio under his arm, dressed in the same charcoal Tom Ford suit he'd been wearing the night Marcus saved her life. He'd been her father's right hand for 8 years before the old man died, and Victoria had kept him on because firing your CFO in the middle of leadership transition sent bad signals to shareholders. Now she wondered what other signals she'd been ignoring. The projections looked strong, were on track for... Victoria turned her laptop screen toward him. The paused footage showed Marcus performing chest compressions while Richard stood 3 feet away, doing nothing. I watched it. All 47 minutes from 4 different angles. Richard's expression went carefully neutral, the look of a man who'd practiced damage control in front of mirrors. "I see. You told me it was handled appropriately. From a liability standpoint," Victoria's laugh came out sharp enough to draw blood. "He saved my life, Richard. While 9 executives with a combined net worth of $800 million stood frozen, a janitor making $14 an hour was the only person who acted. And you destroyed him for it. I was protecting the company from a potential lawsuit." Richard set his portfolio on the edge of her desk. "If we'd kept him employed after he put his hands on you without consent, it's called CPR. It's taught in every high school in America." Victoria stood up, walked to the window overlooking downtown Philadelphia. "What's the real reason you fired him?" The pause lasted 3 seconds too long. "I've explained the real reason, Richard." His jaw tightened. "He violated protocol. Chain of command exists for a reason. We can't have low-level employees making decisions about when it's appropriate to get out. Richard blinked. Excuse me? You're suspended pending an internal review, effective immediately. Give me your access badge and leave the building. Victoria, you're making a mistake. The board won't. Her voice dropped to a temperature that could freeze mercury. The board answers to me. I'm the majority shareholder. Give me your badge. Richard placed it on her desk with a click that sounded like a period at the end of a sentence. His face had gone the color of spoiled milk. You're choosing a janitor over someone who helped build this company from 200 million to 4 billion. I'm choosing what's right over what's convenient. There's a difference. The door closed behind him with enough force to rattle the picture frames on Victoria's wall. She sat back down, her hands shaking from adrenaline and something that felt uncomfortably close to fear. She just suspended the CFO her father had trusted for 2 decades. The board would revolt. Shareholders would demand explanations. But the alternative, doing nothing while Marcus Webb lost his daughter because Victoria Sterling's company had destroyed his reputation. That wasn't something she could live with. She called Daniel Park back. I need Marcus Webb's current location. Right now. The address led her to a neighborhood where Philadelphia showed its bones. Victoria drove her black Mercedes through streets where boarded windows outnumbered working streetlights and corner stores advertised cigarettes behind bulletproof glass. Her GPS directed her to a brick building, the color of dried blood, 4 stories tall, fire escape zigzagging down the facade like a rusty scar. She parked on the street and locked the car twice. Muscle memory from a life where theft was something that happened to other people. The building's entrance door hung crooked on its hinges. The lock had been broken so long, the metal showed wear marks from being pushed open. The stairwell smelled like generations of cooking oil and something chemical she couldn't identify. Apartment 4B was at the end of a hallway with carpet so worn it had gone shiny. Victoria knocked. Silence. She knocked harder. The door across the hall opened, revealing a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that cataloged everything. Who are you looking for? Marcus Webb. I need to speak with him. The woman's expression shifted from suspicion to recognition, then something harder. You're her, the one from TV. Victoria extended her hand. Victoria Sterling. The woman didn't take it. Ruth Martinez. I watch Emma when Marcus is working. Her emphasis on the word working carried an accusation. Or when he was working, before your people threw him out like garbage. That's why I'm here. I need to see him. Ruth studied her for a long moment, then pulled a key from her pocket. He's been sick, 3 days now. Won't go to the doctor because he can't afford it. She unlocked Marcus's door. If you're here to make things worse, you can leave right now. The apartment was smaller than Victoria's walk-in closet. 1 main room serving as kitchen, living room, and dining room. 2 doors leading to what had to be bedrooms barely bigger than cells. Everything was clean but worn, the furniture held together by hope and duct tape. A small girl sat on the floor next to a mattress, a damp cloth in her hands. Emma looked up when Victoria entered, her eyes going wide. You're the lady from the billboard. Victoria's throat went tight. She knelt down so they were at eye level. I'm looking for your dad. Is he here? Emma pointed at the mattress. Marcus lay there, his skin the color of old newspaper, sweat soaking through his t-shirt. His breathing came shallow and rapid. Victoria touched his forehead and jerked her hand back. The heat coming off him could have warmed the whole apartment. How long has he been like this? Emma's voice trembled. Since Tuesday. I made his soup, but he won't eat it. He just says he's tired and goes back to sleep. Victoria pulled out her phone, dialed 911. Ruth grabbed her wrist hard enough to hurt. He can't afford an ambulance. The bill will, I'll cover it. Everything. Just let me help him. Ruth released her grip. The 911 operator came on, and Victoria gave the address, explained the symptoms, emphasized the urgency. 7 minutes, they told her. The ambulance would arrive in 7 minutes. Marcus's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. His lips moved, forming words that barely had sound behind them. Emma. Where's Emma? Victoria took his hand. It felt like holding burning paper. She's right here. She's safe. You are going to be okay. His eyes tried to focus on her face, confusion swimming through the fever. Am I dead? No, you're very much alive, and you're going to stay that way. Why? He coughed, the sound wet and painful. Why are you here? Victoria squeezed his hand, felt the bones shift beneath skin gone thin. Because you saved my life. Now it's my turn to save yours. The sirens announced themselves 3 minutes early. Two paramedics came through the door with practiced efficiency, their assessment rapid and professional. Severe pneumonia complicated by malnutrition and dehydration. Blood pressure dangerously low. Temperature than 104.6. They had him on a stretcher and heading for the stairs before Victoria had time to process the medical terminology. She rode in the ambulance, sitting across from Marcus as the paramedic worked, inserting an IV line, clipping an oxygen monitor to his finger, calling ahead to Mercy General with stats and treatment protocols. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, his hand occasionally twitching like he was reaching for something he couldn't quite grasp. The lead paramedic glanced at Victoria, recognition flickering across his face. You know this man? He saved my life 3 weeks ago. I'm making sure he gets the best care available. The paramedic nodded and went back to monitoring vitals. Emma sat pressed against Ruth in the corner, her teddy bear clutched tight enough to strangle. Victoria caught the girl's eye and tried to smile, but her face felt like it had forgotten how. The hospital staff met them at the emergency entrance, already briefed by the paramedics' radio call. They wheeled Marcus through double doors that swung shut behind them, leaving Victoria in the waiting room with his fluorescent lights and year-old magazines in the particular silence that comes from too many people trying not to think about their own mortality. She pulled out her phone and called Fiona Redford, her executive assistant, who'd worked for Victoria for 6 years and knew how to make impossible things happen. Fiona, I need 3 things done immediately. Fiona's voice came through clear and ready. Go ahead. 1. Book the best private room at Mercy General for Marcus Webb. Spare no expense. 2. I need an apartment for him and his daughter. Fully furnished, safe neighborhood, whatever it takes. 3. Send someone to buy clothes, books, and toys for a 7-year-old girl. Charge everything to my personal account. Understood. Anything else? Victoria watched Ruth comfort Emma across the waiting room, their heads bent together, speaking in whispers. 4. Contact the best Yamali law attorney in Philadelphia. Tell them I need consultation today. I'm paying for their services. On it. The call ended. Victoria sat down in a plastic chair designed by someone who'd never actually sat in one and stared at the doors where they'd taken Marcus. A doctor in blue scrub emerged 40 minutes later, clipboard in hand, exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. Miss Sterling? I'm Dr. Ahmad. You came in with Marcus Webb? Victoria stood. How is he? Critical but stable. Bilateral pneumonia, severe malnutrition, and dehydration. His immune system is compromised, likely from chronic stress and inadequate nutrition. Dr. Ahmad flipped through his notes. Another 24 hours without treatment, and we'd be having a very different conversation. The words hit like physical blows. Victoria had been recovered from her cardiac arrest and back at work within a week. Her medical care handled by the best cardiologist in Pennsylvania. Marcus had been dying slowly in a 4th-floor walk-up, too poor to afford the help that could have prevented this. What does he need? IV antibiotics, fluids, rest, and time. We're moving him to a private room. He'll need to stay at least 5 days, possibly longer. Whatever he needs, he gets. The best care available. Send all bills to me directly. Dr. Ahmad studied her face for a moment, the calculation of someone trained to read between lines. The nurse mentioned your Victoria Sterling, the Sterling Global Victoria Sterling. Yes. We heard about what happened, the cardiac arrest. He paused. This is the man who performed CPR? This is the man who saved my life while my executives stood and watched. Then my company destroyed him for it. Victoria's voice came out steadier than she felt. I'm trying to fix that now. Dr. Ahmad nodded slowly. Room 412. You can see him once we get him settled. About 30 minutes. Room 412 had a view of downtown Philadelphia, the city skyline cutting sharp angles against the late afternoon sun. Marcus lay propped up on pillows, oxygen tube under his nose, IV line running clear fluids into his arm. His color had improved from newspaper to something approaching human. Emma sat on a chair beside the bed, her hand wrapped around two of his fingers. Marcus's eyes tracked Victoria as she entered. He was conscious now, the fever broken enough to restore some clarity. His voice came out rough, like he'd been gargling gravel. "You're really here?" Victoria pulled up a chair on the opposite side of the bed. "I'm really here." "Why?" She'd had the entire ambulance ride and 40 minutes in the waiting room to prepare an answer, but the words still came hard. "Because I watched the security footage. All of it, every angle. I saw what you did for me, and I saw how they treated you for it." Marcus closed his eyes. "So you know." "I know you saved my life. I know 9 people making 6-figure salaries did nothing while you risked yours. I know my CFO dragged you away while you were trying to keep my heart beating. And I know they fired you, destroyed your reputation, and left you to die in an apartment where the heat barely works." Her hands clenched in her lap. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm deeply, truly sorry." He opened his eyes again, studying her face like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't add up. "Why didn't you know? You're the CEO." The question landed with surgical precision, finding every doubt Victoria had been carrying since she'd watched that footage. "Because I trusted the wrong people. Because I assumed the system worked. Because I was recovering and I let Richard handle the details." She took a breath. "Because I failed you." Emma piped up from her chair, her voice clear and certain. "Daddy says you should never trust people who use big words when small ones work better. He says it means they're hiding something." Marcus's lips twitched. "Emma, it's true. You said it when the landlord sent that letter about terminating our tenancy agreement, instead of just saying we had to leave." Victoria found herself smiling despite everything. "Your father sounds like a smart man." "He's the smartest." Emma's grip tightened on Marcus's fingers. "Are you going to make the bad people stop saying lies about him?" The question hung in the air, demanding an answer that actually meant something. Victoria leaned forward, meeting Emma's gaze directly. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do." Marcus's voice cut in, quiet but firm. "You can't fix this. My name is poison. The internet doesn't forget, and it doesn't care about the truth. Then we'll give them a truth too loud to ignore." Victoria stood, paced to the window, turned back. "I'm not just here to apologize. I'm here to offer you a job." The silence in the room felt like a held breath. Marcus stared at her. "A job. Director of Employee Welfare at Sterling Global. Salary $120,000 per year. Full benefits. Budget of $5 million to start." Marcus's laugh came out bitter. "I don't have qualifications for—" "You have the only qualification that matters. You know what it's like to be invisible in a system that should protect you. You know what happens when executives care more about liability than human lives." Victoria crossed back to his bedside. "I want you to build a program from scratch. Real benefits, real accountability, real change for the people who actually make the company run." "Why would you trust me with that?" "Because you risked everything to save someone you didn't even know. That's not just bravery, that's character." She pulled a folded document from her purse, laid it on the bedside table. "This is an official statement clearing your record, signed and notarized. It states that your actions were emergency medical intervention, life-saving and entirely appropriate. No misconduct, no violation." Marcus reached for the paper with shaking hands, unfolded it, read it through twice. His jaw worked like he was chewing words too big to swallow. "This doesn't change what people think." "No, but it's a start. The rest depends on whether you're willing to fight." Victoria sat back down. "I'm not offering charity, Marcus. I'm offering power. The power to make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else at my company. The power to hold people accountable. The power to change the system instead of just surviving it." Ruth spoke from the doorway where she'd been standing, silent this whole time. "That's a lot of pretty words from someone whose company put him here." Victoria turned to face her. "You're right. Words are cheap. So here's what I've already done. I've suspended Richard Grayson pending review. I've arranged for Marcus and Emma to move into a furnished apartment in a safe neighborhood, rent-free until Marcus is back on his feet. I've covered all medical bills, and I've hired a family law attorney to fight Charlotte Reed's custody petition." Ruth's expression softened slightly. "You did all that already?" I did all that before I came here, because sorry isn't enough. Victoria looked back at Marcus. But none of it means anything if you don't want the job. You don't owe me anything. If you want me to help you and Emma get settled somewhere away from Sterling Global, I'll do that instead. This is your choice. Marcus lay back against the pillows, his eyes closed. Emma watched him, her small hands still wrapped around his fingers. The machines beeped their steady rhythm. Outside the window, Philadelphia moved through its Friday afternoon routines, people heading home from jobs they'd still have on Monday. When Marcus spoke, his voice was barely audible. I need time to think. Take all the time you need. Victoria stood. I'll be back tomorrow. Rest. Let the antibiotics work. We can talk more when you're stronger. She made it to the door before Marcus called out. Miss Sterling? Victoria paused, turned back. Marcus's eyes were open now, clear despite the fever still burning through his system. Thank you for coming, for seeing the truth. You saved my life when you had nothing to gain. This is the least I can do. She left before the tears threatening at the corners of her eyes could spill over. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and took 3 deep breaths, the kind her therapist had taught her after the divorce, when panic attacks came like clockwork at 3 a.m. A man had nearly died because her company valued reputation over human decency. She'd built her career on the foundation her father laid, and that foundation was rotten. Fiona called at 6:15 with updates. The apartment was secured, 3 bedrooms in Rittenhouse Square, furnished, available immediately. The family law attorney, Margaret Chen, one of the best in the state, had already reviewed Charlotte Reed's petition and found 3 significant weaknesses. The private room at Mercy General was booked for as long as needed. Everything was in motion. Victoria drove home to her penthouse feeling like she'd fought a battle with her bare hands. The whiskey in her cabinet tasted like copper and regret. She stood at her window 40 floors above the city and made a decision that would either save her soul or destroy her company. Marcus Webb had done the right thing when it cost him everything. Now it was her turn. The days blurred together in a haze of antibiotics and gradual recovery. Marcus's fever broke on day 3. His appetite returned on day 4. By day 5, he could sit up without the world tilting sideways. Dr. Ahmed cleared him for discharge on day 7 with a stern warning about rest, nutrition, and following up with a primary care physician. The apartment in Rittenhouse Square felt like walking into someone else's life. 3 bedrooms, hardwood floors, windows that actually closed properly. Emma ran from room to our room, her laughter echoing off walls that didn't have water stains or peeling paint. Ruth walked through slowly, touching things like they might disappear if she pressed too hard. This is real? Marcus stood in the middle of the living room, his duffel bag containing everything he owned hanging from one shoulder. Apparently. And she's not asking for anything in return? She offered me a job, that's all. Ruth gave him a look that said she'd been alive too long to believe in free lunches. Jobs come with strings, Marcus. Make sure you know what you're agreeing to before you sign anything. The job offer sat on the kitchen counter, actual granite, not the laminate held down with contact cement, waiting for his signature. Marcus read it through 3 times, looking for the trap. Director of Employee Welfare. $120,000 per year. Full health insurance, dental, vision. Budget of $5 million to design and implement programs as he saw fit. Reports directly to the CEO. It was more money than his father had earned in his entire life. More power than Marcus had ever imagined having. And all he had to do was trust the woman whose company had already destroyed him once. He spent 2 weeks researching Sterling Global, reading every employee review he could find online, pulling public financial statements, scanning news articles about workplace incidents. The pattern emerged slowly, like a photograph developing in chemicals. 47 terminations in 3 years classified as performance issues or voluntary resignation. Employees who'd complained about safety violations suddenly let go during restructuring. Warehouse workers reporting unpaid overtime and finding themselves laid off a month later. The company had problems deeper than one janitor getting fired. The rot went all the way through. Frank Wilson called on a Thursday evening, his voice careful. Marcus, I need to tell you something about Richard Grayson. Marcus put the call on speaker. Go ahead. He's been asking questions about you, your history, your record, anything he can use. I heard him talking to someone in legal about sealed juvenile records. The old arrest, 16 years old, stealing cough medicine for his mother, 3 months of community service, had been sealed by court order. But sealed didn't mean gone, just harder to access. When was this? 2 days ago. I'm not supposed to tell you, but Frank paused. You saved Ms. Sterling's life. You deserve better than whatever Richard's planning. Marcus thanked him and ended the call. The trap he'd been looking for wasn't in the job offer. It was waiting to spring the moment he accepted it. He called Victoria at her direct office line, the number she'd written on her business card in actual ink. She answered on the second ring. Marcus, how are you feeling? Better. I need to talk to you about the job. Of course. When would you like to meet? Tomorrow, your office. I have conditions. The pause lasted exactly 1 second. I'll clear my calendar for 10 a.m. Sterling Global's executive floor had a different quality of silence than the rest of the building, the kind that came from walls thick enough to muffle screaming. Victoria's office occupied the corner with views of downtown Philadelphia and the Delaware River, floor-to-ceiling windows that probably cost more than Marcus's apartment had cost in total rent over 7 years. Victoria stood when he entered, extending her hand. He shook it. Her grip was firm, businesslike, the handshake of someone who'd had to prove herself in rooms full of men who didn't think she belonged there. Thank you for coming. Marcus sat in the chair across from her desk, the leather soft enough to feel like surrender. I'll take the job, but I have 3 conditions. Victoria pulled out a legal pad and pen. Go ahead. 1, I report directly to you, not HR, not the board, not anyone else in the chain of command. If I find something wrong, I need to know I can bring it to you without it getting buried. She wrote it down. Agreed. 2, I want full access to all employee files and termination records for the past 5 years. Everything. No redactions. Her pen hesitated for half a second before continuing. Agreed. 3, if I find corruption or illegal activity, I have your word you'll act on it, no matter who's involved or what it costs the company. Victoria set down her pen and met his eyes. The silence stretched until Marcus started to think he'd pushed too far. Then she smiled, and it reached her eyes for the first time since he'd met her. You're already thinking like a director. Those are exactly the right conditions. She extended her hand again. Deal. They shook on it, and Marcus felt the weight of the decision settle across his shoulders like a coat he'd need to learn how to wear. The blog post appeared 3 days before Marcus's official start date. Philly Truth Bomb had a readership in the low thousands, but an algorithm-friendly headline. Disgraced janitor hired to top position at Sterling Global. CEO's judgment question. The article didn't mention Marcus by name, didn't have to. It referenced his sealed juvenile record, somehow unsealed, the 16-year-old arrest, the cough medicine, the community service. It mentioned his ex-wife's custody battle, her allegations of unstable living conditions. It quoted anonymous Sterling Global sources expressing concern about Victoria's emotional decision-making and favoritism towards someone who may have ulterior motives. Marcus read it on his new laptop in his new apartment while Emma was at her new school. The words blurred together, but the message came through clear. Richard Grayson was fighting back. His phone rang, Victoria's name on the screen. I saw it. I know, her voice was tight with controlled fury. Richard's behind this. I'm certain of it. How do you know? Because nobody else had access to your sealed juvenile record. He must have paid someone in the court system. She took a breath. I'm calling a press conference for tomorrow. We're going to tell the truth before he can twist it any further. Marcus's stomach dropped. I'm not ready for that. You saved my life. You have nothing to be ashamed of. And you deserve better than letting Richard Grayson control the narrative. She was right, but that didn't make the thought of standing in front of cameras any less terrifying. Marcus had spent his entire adult life being invisible, and now she was asking him to be seen by everyone at once. What do I say? The truth. All of it. Your mother was sick. You were 16 and desperate. You made a mistake, and you paid for it. Then you grew up, had a daughter, and learned CPR because you never wanted to feel helpless again. Her voice softened. The story isn't the mistake, Marcus. It's what you did after. The press conference happened in Sterling Global's main lobby, cameras from every local news channel and 3 national outlets. Marcus stood at a podium with the company logo behind him, his new suit feeling like armor made of paper. Victoria stood to his right, close enough to offer support without making it look like he needed protecting. 50 reporters, 100 questions waiting to be asked. Marcus gripped the podium and remembered Emma saying she wanted to write about him for her school assignment on heroes. His voice came out steady. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 34 years old and I'm a single father. When I was 16, I stole $12 worth of cough medicine from a pharmacy because my mother was sick and we couldn't afford a doctor. I got caught, I got arrested. The judge gave me community service because I was young and scared and trying to help my mom. The reporter scribbled notes. Cameras rolled. Marcus kept going. That record was sealed years ago. Someone leaked it to make you think I'm unfit for this job. He paused. But here's what they can't leak. 3 weeks ago, I saved Victoria Sterling's life when 9 executives did nothing. I performed CPR while they stood frozen. I kept going while they hit me and called me a predator. I did it because that's what decent people do when someone needs help. His hands had stopped shaking. The words came easier now, muscle memory from every time he'd had to explain himself to skeptical job interviewers or social workers or judges. I lost everything for doing the right thing. My dom, my reputation, my home, almost my daughter. And now I have a chance to make sure that never happens to anyone else. He leaned forward. So yes, I made a mistake at 16, but I'm not ashamed because that scared kid who stole medicine grew up to be a man who saves lives. If that makes me unfit, then we have very different definitions of character. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then someone started clapping. Another person joined. Within 10 seconds, half the press corps was applauding, and Marcus realized he'd just done something he'd spent weeks afraid to do. He'd told the truth and lived. The questions came rapid fire after that. How did he feel about Richard Grayson? No comment. What programs did he plan to implement? Still developing them, but accountability would be central. Did he blame Sterling Global for what happened? No, he blamed individuals who put reputation over humanity. Victoria stepped forward for the last question, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd made a decision and wouldn't be argued out of it. Marcus Webb represents the values Sterling Global should have been upholding all along. He's not here because I feel guilty. He's here because he's exactly the kind of person who should be in a position of power, someone who knows what it costs when the system fails. The press conference ended. Marcus walked out of the building into November air that smelled like rain and exhaust and possibility. His phone had 47 new messages. Social media was exploding. The story was spreading the way truth did when it finally got louder than lies. Frank Wilson waited by the main entrance, his security guard uniform crisp, his grin wide. You did good in there, man, real good. Marcus shook his hand, felt the calluses that came from 20 years of opening doors for people who never learned his name. Thanks for the warning about Richard. Brotherhood of guys who actually work for a living. Frank clapped him on the shoulder. Go be great, Marcus. Make them remember we exist. That night, Emma asked him to read the news articles about the press conference. Marcus sat on the edge of her bed in their new apartment, her nightlight throwing soft shadows across walls that didn't leak cold air through cracks. Are people still saying bad things about you, Daddy? Some people are, but more people are saying good things now. Because you told the truth. Marcus thought about that, about how the truth hadn't mattered until he'd said it loud enough that ignoring it became harder than listening. Because I stopped being afraid of what people thought and started caring about what I knew was right. Emma hugged her teddy bear, a new one, nicer than the old threadbare thing, but she'd insisted on keeping both. I'm going to do that too when I grow up. You already do, baby. That's why you're braver than me. 300 miles away in an office that no longer bore his name on the door, Richard Grayson sat in the dark and planned his next move. Suspending him had been a mistake. Marcus Webb was a mistake. Victoria's bleeding heart crusade was going to cost them all everything they'd built. But Richard had been in this business for 23 years. He knew where the bodies were buried because he'd helped bury most of them. 47 terminations, 2.3 million in embezzled welfare funds. Secrets that could bring down half the executive team if exposed. Marcus Webb thought he was going to change the system. Richard was going to make sure the system crushed him first. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he had been saving for emergencies. The voice on the other end was professional, detached, expensive. I need comprehensive background work. Marcus Webb, everything you can find. And I need leverage on Victoria Sterling. Personal, professional, anything that makes her vulnerable. That'll cost you. I didn't ask the price. I asked if you could do it. Consider it done. Richard ended the call and poured himself 3 fingers of scotch that cost more than Marcus earned in a week at his old job. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The game was just beginning. Marcus's first day as Director of Employee Welfare began at 7:30 on a Monday morning in January, when the Philadelphia streets still held darkness like a secret. The office on Sterling Global's 22nd floor bore his name on the door in letters that looked temporary, like someone expected him to fail and didn't want to waste good signage. Inside, a desk salvaged from storage, 2 chairs with uneven legs, and windows that overlooked the same city where he'd scrubbed floors 8 weeks ago. He'd hired 3 people. Lisa Park, 28, former social worker who'd quit her last job after watching management ignore abuse reports. James Torres, 45, ex-HR manager terminated for whistleblowing at his previous company, blacklisted from corporate work until Marcus found him cleaning houses. Keisha Williams, 32, attorney who'd specialized in employment law before burning out on defending corporations against the workers they destroyed. They sat around the salvage desk that first morning, 4 people who'd been chewed up by systems that valued profit over humanity, now tasked with rebuilding one from the inside. Lisa opened her laptop. I set up the anonymous complaint hotline over the weekend. We're already getting calls. How many? 127 in the first 48 hours. The number landed like a stone thrown through glass. Marcus had known Sterling Global had problems, but the volume of accumulated pain shocked him into silence. James passed around printed summaries, his hands shaking slightly from years of being punished for doing exactly this. Sexual harassment from 3 different supervisors in the warehouse division, unpaid overtime across 4 departments, safety violations in the shipping facility that management's known about for 18 months. And that's just the top layer. Keisha leaned back, her expression carved from something harder than skepticism. Every complaint gets investigated, no exceptions. We document everything, build airtight cases, and when we find violations, we act. No settling quietly, no making people sign NDAs. Real consequences. Marcus felt the weight of 127 voices pressing against his chest. We're not here to make Sterling look good. We're here to make Sterling be good. If that costs people their bonds, so be it. The first case came 3 days later. Maria Santos, cleaning staff, reported systematic harassment from her supervisor over 9 months. The man had cornered her in storage rooms, made comments about her body, threatened her job when she complained to his manager. That manager had told her to stop being sensitive and get back to work. Marcus drove to Maria's apartment in South Philadelphia, a neighborhood where rent was cheap because safety wasn't guaranteed. She opened the door with the wariness of someone who'd learned that authority figures rarely came bearing good news. Ms. Santos, I'm Marcus Webb. I want to hear your story. She studied his face, looking for the trap. You're the one from the news, the janitor. I was. Now I'm the person who makes sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. He stayed in the doorway, not presuming entry. I can't promise this will be easy, but I can promise I'll listen, and I'll believe you, and I'll do everything in my power to fix it. Maria invited him in. Her apartment was smaller than his old place, but spotless, photographs of children covering one wall. She told him everything, her voice steady, even when the details made Marcus's hands clench into fists. 9 months of escalating harassment, 3 complaints filed with HR that disappeared into bureaucratic black holes. A system that protected supervisors and sacrificed the workers underneath them. Marcus recorded every word, took photographs of the documentation she'd kept, copies of her complaints, emails from HR dismissing her concerns, text messages from the supervisor that crossed every line. What happens now? Marcus met her eyes, saw the hope there fighting against years of disappointment. Well, now I make sure everyone knows the truth, and the man who did this to you loses his job. The investigation took 6 days. James pulled the supervisor's personnel file, found 2 previous harassment complaints from other facilities that had been settled quietly with small payouts and ironclad NDAs. Keisha built the legal case, documenting each violation of federal employment law. Lisa interviewed 4 other women who'd experienced similar treatment, but never reported it because they'd watched Maria get ignored. Marcus presented the findings to Victoria in her office, the evidence stacked in a folder thick enough to be used as a weapon. She read through it methodically, her expression growing colder with each page. How long has this been going on? According to the files James found, at least 5 years. Probably longer, but records before that were purged during a system upgrade. Victoria's jaw tightened. Who knew? HR knew, his direct manager knew, and Richard Grayson signed off on the settlement payments. The name hung between them like smoke from a gun that had already been fired. Victoria stood, walked to her window, stood there for a long moment, watching Philadelphia wake up 40 floors below. Fire the supervisor, fire his manager, fire everyone in HR who handled those complaints and did nothing, and pull every settlement from the last 10 years. I want to know how deep this goes. Marcus added the supervisor's termination to a growing list. By the end of January, 7 managers had been let go. By February, the number climbed to 11. Sterling Global's executive floor started looking at Marcus like he was a plague carrier, someone whose presence threatened their comfortable certainty that everything was fine. The second major case revealed itself through patterns James noticed while reviewing termination records. 47 employees fired over 3 years, all categorized as performance issues or voluntary resignations. But when James cross-referenced them with complaint files, a different picture emerged. 41 of them had filed grievances about safety violations, wage theft, or discrimination in the 90 days before termination. Marcus spread the documentation across his desk, connecting dots that formed a constellation of systematic retaliation. David Chen, warehouse worker, reported missing overtime pay. Fired 6 weeks later for excessive absence, despite perfect attendance records. Angela Reeves, administrative assistant, filed sexual harassment complaint. Terminated 2 months later for poor performance, despite 3 years of excellent reviews. The pattern repeated itself 41 times. Every termination had been personally approved by Richard Grayson. Keisha reviewed the files with the precision of someone who'd spent years studying exactly this kind of corruption. This is a federal case. Systematic retaliation violates multiple labor laws. The fines alone could reach 8 figures. What about criminal charges? Possible, but we'd need evidence of financial benefit, proof that he personally gained from these terminations. James had been quiet, his fingers flying across his laptop keyboard, pulling financial records from databases he probably shouldn't have had access to. He turned his screen toward Marcus. The Employee Welfare Fund, $5 million annually allocated from corporate profits. But according to actual disbursements, only $2.7 million was spent on employee programs over the past 5 years. That's $2.3 million unaccounted for. Marcus leaned in, studying the spreadsheet. Where did it go? Transferred to a consulting firm called Grayson Associates LLC, which is Richard's company. The pieces locked into place with the inevitability of mathematics. Richard had been systematically firing anyone who threatened to expose problems, then embezzling money meant to help the workers he was destroying. The corruption wasn't incidental. It was the entire structure. Marcus pulled out his phone, called Victoria's direct line. She answered immediately. I need to see you. Now, bring your attorney and your head of security. The meeting happened in a conference room different from the one where Marcus had saved Victoria's life. But the view was the same. Philadelphia spreading out below like a game board where people's lives were the pieces being moved. Victoria listened without interrupting as Marcus laid out the evidence, the terminations, the pattern of retaliation, the missing $2.3 million, Richard Grayson's name appearing again and again like a signature on a confession. Daniel Park, head of security, reviewed the financial records with increasing alarm. This is embezzlement, clear cut. Margaret Chen, the attorney, nodded. We report this to the FBI. Today. Victoria's hands were flat on the table, her knuckles white. He helped my father build this company. He was at my father's funeral. Her voice cracked. He's been stealing from the people who needed help most. He's been doing more than stealing. Marcus pulled out the last file, the one that made his stomach turn. James found correspondence between Richard and board members. He's been planning a vote of no confidence against you. They're moving to remove you as CEO at next month's quarterly meeting. The silence felt like falling. Victoria looked up, her eyes hard enough to cut glass. On what grounds? Emotional decision-making, favoritism, poor judgment in hiring an alleged sexual predator to a director position. Marcus pushed the printed emails across the table. He's been coordinating this since the day you suspended him. Victoria read through the messages, her expression cycling through shock, fury, and something that looked like grief. Half the board is in on it. They're scared you'll expose what they've been covering up for years. Marcus stood, paced to the window. Richard knows I'm digging into termination records. He knows we're going to find evidence that implicates board members in the retaliation cases. The vote isn't about your competence. It's about self-preservation. Margaret cleared her throat. We have evidence of criminal activity. We report it. The board becomes irrelevant. Richard will be arrested. But the damage to the company's reputation could be catastrophic. Daniel looked at Victoria. We're talking federal investigation, lawsuits from 41 terminated employees, media coverage that'll make the CPR story look like a footnote. Victoria turned her chair toward the window, watching the city for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of decisions that couldn't be unmade. My father spent 40 years building this company by crushing people who got in his way. I inherited that legacy, and I've been carrying it like it was something to be proud of. She turned back to face them. Report everything to the FBI. Contact every employee who was wrongfully terminated and offer full restitution plus damages. And tell the board there'll be an emergency meeting tomorrow morning where they can either support the investigation or join Richard in whatever hole he's about to fall into. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, respect mixing with fear. They'll try to vote you out anyway. You'll lose the company. Victoria's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Better to lose the company doing what's right than keep it by becoming what my father was. Sometimes you have to burn down the house to kill the rot inside. The FBI agents arrived on a Thursday morning, 3 of them in dark suits that screamed federal authority. Richard Grayson was in a board meeting when they walked into Sterling Global's executive floor, their credentials making secretaries step aside and doors open without being knocked on. Marcus watched from his office window as they led Richard out in handcuffs, his silver hair perfectly styled even in the moment of his public destruction. Cameras had somehow learned the exact timing. Marcus suspected Daniel Park had excellent relationships with local media and captured Richard's perp walk in high definition. The arrest made national news by noon. By evening, the full story had spread. Systematic embezzlement, retaliation against whistleblowers, a CFO who'd stolen from the people most in need while destroying anyone who threatened to expose him. Sterling Global stock dropped 12% in after-hours trading. Charlotte called Marcus at 7:15, her voice tight with something he couldn't quite identify. I saw the news. Marcus put the phone on speaker, his hands busy making dinner for Emma. What about it? Richard Grayson contacted me 2 weeks ago, offered me $50,000 to testify about your unstable environment, help with my custody case. The knife in Marcus's hand stopped moving. What did you tell him? I told him to go to hell. Charlotte's laugh was bitter. I'm a lot of things, Marcus, but I'm not going to help some rich asshole destroy my daughter's father for money. Why are you telling me this now? Because the FBI called me this morning, wanted to know about my relationship with Richard, any offers he made. She paused. I told them everything. They said it might be witness tampering or conspiracy or something. I don't know, but they're adding it to the case against him. Marcus leaned against the counter, processing this new variable in an equation that kept getting more complicated. Thank you. Don't thank me. I did the minimum required to not be a complete piece of shit. Her voice softened. How's Emma? She's good, happy, safe. That's all I wanted. The line went quiet for a moment. I dropped the custody petition yesterday before the FBI called. You're a good father, Marcus. Emma's lucky to have you. The call ended before Marcus could respond. He stood in his kitchen. Kitchen, new life, new problems replacing the old ones, and felt the weight of Charlotte's admission. She'd had a chance to destroy him for money, and she'd chosen their daughter instead. Maybe people could change after all. The emergency board meeting happened the next morning in the same conference room where Marcus had first met with Victoria's attorney. 8 board members sat around the table, their expressions ranging from defensive to openly hostile. Victoria stood at the head, Marcus beside her, Margaret Chen ready with legal documentation. Victoria didn't waste time with pleasantries. The FBI has arrested Richard Grayson for embezzlement and retaliation. The evidence is overwhelming. They're also investigating several board members for complicity in covering up workplace violations. Board member Thomas Hartford, 63, red-faced and blustering, leaned forward. This is a witch hunt. Richard's been with this company for 23 years, during which he stole $2.3 million and systematically fired anyone who threatened to expose corruption. Victoria's voice could have frozen nitrogen. Some of you knew, some of you helped, and all of you are about to decide whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the prosecution. Sarah Winters, the only female board member besides Victoria, spoke carefully. What are you proposing? Full cooperation with the federal investigation, complete transparency, restitution to every wrongfully terminated employee, and immediate resignation of any board member who can't commit to fundamental structural reform. You're asking us to destroy our own reputations. Thomas's face was approaching purple. Shareholders will crucify us. Marcus stepped forward, his voice quiet but carrying weight earned through experience rather than title. You're asking workers who were sexually harassed, cheated out of wages, and fired for telling the truth to trust that this time will be different. Your reputations are the least of what's owed here. The vote split exactly down the middle. 4 board members resigned immediately, their lawyers already drafting statements about how they'd been misled by Richard and deeply regretted any oversights. 4 stayed, including Sarah Winters and 3 others who joined after Richard's schemes were already in motion. Victoria called an all-staff meeting for that afternoon, broadcast to every Sterling Global facility across the country. 5,000 employees tuned in, watching their CEO stand in front of cameras and do something corporate executives almost never did: admit failure and promise genuine change. My name is Victoria Sterling. 3 months ago, Marcus Webb saved my life. My company thanked him by destroying his reputation, firing him, and leaving him to die in an apartment where his 7-year-old daughter had to take care of him because he couldn't afford a doctor. Her voice was steady, unflinching. That happened because our CFO valued protecting executives over protecting employees. It happened because the system I inherited prioritizes profit over people, and it happened because I wasn't paying attention. The silence from 5,000 watching employees felt like judgment. Richard Grayson was arrested yesterday for embezzling $2.3 million from funds meant to help you, for systematically firing anyone who complained about unsafe conditions or unpaid wages, for building a culture where reporting problems got you terminated and staying silent got you exploited. Victoria looked directly into the camera. Some board members knew, some managers knew, and I should have known, but I trusted the wrong people and assumed the system worked. Marcus watched her transform in real time, shedding the armor of corporate speak and finding something that looked like actual humanity underneath. Marcus Webb is now our Director of Employee Welfare. Because he knows what you know. This company has failed you. He's building a program with real accountability, real protections, real consequences for people who abuse power. Every complaint will be investigated. Every violation will have penalties. And if you were wrongfully terminated in the past 5 years, we're reviewing your case and offering full restitution. Victoria paused. This won't fix everything overnight, but it's a start. And unlike past promises, this one comes with a budget, authority, and someone who actually gives a damn leading it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, the employee hotline received 300 new calls. By evening, that number doubled. Workers who'd been silent for years suddenly had permission to speak, and they were shouting. Marcus worked 16-hour days through February and into March, building cases, documenting violations, fighting battles against managers who thought their positions made them untouchable. He fired people who'd been with Sterling Global for decades. He promoted people who'd been stuck in entry-level positions despite years of excellent work. He created policies that treated janitors with the same respect as executives, because he remembered exactly how it felt to be invisible. Emma started calling the apartment home instead of the new place. Ruth visited twice a week, bringing casseroles and wisdom earned through 65 years of watching people. Frank Wilson stopped by some evenings, the two men sitting on the balcony drinking beer and talking about nothing important, because sometimes that was what friendship meant. Victoria began showing up at Marcus's office unannounced, ostensibly to discuss program updates, but really because she'd spent 2 years running a company from behind walls of isolation and was just starting to remember what it felt like to connect with someone who saw her as a person rather than a position. They were standing at his window on a Thursday in late March, watching the sun set over Philadelphia, when she finally asked the question that had been building between them for weeks. "Why did you take the job? Really? After everything we did to you, you could have walked away, taken the settlement, disappeared. Why stay and fight?" Marcus turned to look at her, this woman who'd been willing to lose her company rather than compromise on what was right. "Because power without responsibility is just an illusion. You taught me that. I think you already knew it. Maybe, but I'd never met anyone at your level who actually believed it." He turned back to the window. "Most people with power spend their whole lives protecting it. You're willing to burn it all down if that's what justice requires." Victoria moved closer, her shoulder almost touching his. "That sounds dangerously close to respect, Mr. Webb. Might even be admiration, Miss Sterling." The moment stretched, charged with possibilities neither of them was quite ready to name. Then Victoria's phone buzzed, shattering the silence with an emergency alert from Daniel Park. The text was simple and terrifying. "Richard made bail. We have a problem." Richard Grayson walked out of federal detention at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, $2 million in bail money posted by someone whose identity was buried behind 3 layers of corporate shells. His lawyer met him at the gate, a shark in a suit who specialized in making federal cases disappear through procedural warfare. Richard sat in the back of a town car, pulled out a burner phone, and made a call to a number that didn't exist in any directory. "I need something done, quietly." The voice on the other end was professional, detached, expensive. "What's the target?" "Marcus Webb's daughter, 7 years old, blonde hair, attends West Philadelphia Elementary." "You want her hurt?" "I want her missing, not permanently. Just long enough to remind Webb that some fights have consequences he can't afford." The price was named. Richard transferred funds from an account in Grand Cayman that the FBI hadn't found yet. The transaction completed without leaving fingerprints. Charlotte Reed was the weak link. Richard had cultivated her carefully, feeding her information about Marcus's new life, stoking resentment about how he'd moved on while she was still struggling. The $50,000 offer had been rejected, but desperation was a lever that could be pulled from multiple angles. He called her from a clean phone. "Charlotte, it's Alan Westbrook from Family Legal Services. We spoke last month about your custody case." "I dropped that case." "I understand, but we've received concerning reports about Marcus Webb's living situation. His daughter Emma has been seen with bruises, missed several days of school. We're required to investigate." Charlotte's voice sharpened with maternal instinct, the same instinct that had kept her from selling out Marcus for money. "Emma's hurt? Are you sure? We need to verify. Could you pick her up from school tomorrow for a welfare check? We'll have a social worker meet you at our office." The lie was elaborate, professional, designed to trigger every fear a mother carried about failing her child. Charlotte agreed, unaware that Family Legal Services didn't exist, and the social worker was actually a man Richard had hired to make Emma disappear for exactly long enough to break Marcus Webb. Emma left school on Monday afternoon with a woman claiming to be her mother, a woman she barely remembered, but whose face matched the one photograph Marcus kept in a drawer. The teacher checked the approved pickup list, saw Charlotte Reed's name, and released Emma into custody. By the time Marcus arrived for pickup at 3:15, Emma was gone. Panic hit like cardiac arrest, sudden and all-consuming. The teacher explained about the mother, showed the signature, pointed to the authorization form that Marcus had filled out months ago when the custody battle was still active and Charlotte might have legitimate visitation. Marcus called Charlotte's number. It rang 4 times before she answered, confusion evident in her voice. "Marcus, what's wrong? Where's Emma?" "What? She's at school. Why would—" "She's not at school. The teacher said you picked her up 20 minutes ago." Charlotte's voice went from confused to terrified in the space between heartbeats. "I didn't pick her up. I'm at work. I've been here since 9. Marcus's world tilted sideways. Someone had taken his daughter using Charlotte's name, and there was only one person with motive and resources to orchestrate something this cruel. He called Victoria from his car, driving nowhere because he didn't know where to go. She answered before the first ring finished. "Richard has Emma." Victoria's intake of breath sounded like she'd been punched. "How do you know?" "Someone posing as Charlotte picked her up from school. Charlotte's at work. Richard's the only person who benefits from this." "I'm calling Daniel Park and the FBI right now." "Where are you?" "Driving. I don't know where. Marcus's voice cracked. "He took my daughter, Victoria. He took Emma." "We'll find her. I swear to God, Marcus, we'll find her." The burner phone Richard had given to his hired man buzzed with a text at 4:07 p.m. Package secured, awaiting instructions. Richard sat in a safe house in Fishtown, a neighborhood where abandoned warehouses still outnumbered renovated lofts. He typed his response carefully. Hold position. Wait for contact. His endgame was elegant in its simplicity. Marcus would receive a call at precisely 6 p.m. Richard would offer a trade. Emma for the evidence. All documentation of embezzlement, all witness statements, all files that implicated board members in the cover-up. Marcus would agree because parents always agreed when their children were the price. The evidence would be destroyed. Richard would walk away from the federal charges through lack of proof. And Marcus Webb would spend the rest of his life knowing he'd chosen his daughter over justice, a choice that would eat him alive from the inside. The phone call came at 6:03, the number blocked, Marcus's hands shaking so hard he almost dropped his phone before answering. "Mr. Webb, I believe I have something of yours." Marcus recognized the voice immediately, Richard's smooth corporate tone with something darker underneath. "If you hurt her, Emma is perfectly safe, for now. Whether she stays that way depends entirely on your choices in the next 2 hours." Richard's voice was calm, reasonable, the tone of someone negotiating a business deal. "I want every piece of evidence you've gathered, all digital files, all physical documents, all witness recordings. You bring them to Pier 52, Warehouse 7, at 8 p.m. tonight, alone. No police, no FBI, no Victoria Sterling, just you and the evidence. And if I don't, then Emma stays missing, permanently. Do we understand each other?" Marcus understood perfectly. Richard was gambling that a father's love would override his principles, that saving one child mattered more than saving hundreds of workers who'd been exploited. And Richard was right. Marcus would burn every piece of evidence, let every criminal walk free, sacrifice every principle he'd fought for, if that was the price of getting Emma back. "I'll be there." "Excellent decision. And Mr. Webb, if I see any sign of law enforcement, Emma disappears. I have nothing left to lose. You still have everything." The line went dead. Marcus sat in his car in the parking lot of a grocery store in West Philadelphia, his whole body shaking, and realized he was about to make a choice that would define the rest of his life. He called Victoria. She answered immediately, FBI agents already tracing phone records in the background. "He wants a trade. 8 p.m., Pier 52, Warehouse 7. Emma for all the evidence. The FBI can set up surveillance, move in when—" "No." Marcus's voice was flat, final. He said no police. If he sees anything, Emma disappears. I can't risk it. Victoria was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" Exactly what he asked. Bring the evidence. Get my daughter back. Let him win. "Marcus, we can't let him." His voice broke. "She's 7 years old, Victoria. She's my entire world. I don't care about justice or evidence or putting Richard in prison if the cost is Emma's life. I know, Victoria's voice softened, which is why I'm coming with you. He said, come alone. I don't care what he said. You saved my life. I'm not letting you face this alone. The pieces of a plan started forming in Marcus's mind, dangerous and desperate, but possible. Do you trust me? With my life. Literally. Then I need you to do exactly what I say. And Victoria, if this goes wrong, if something happens to me, promise me you'll take care of Emma. Nothing's going to happen to you. We're both walking out of there with your daughter. Marcus ended the call and made one more, this one to Frank Wilson. The old security guard answered on the second ring. Marcus, I heard about Emma. The whole building knows. What can I do? I need you to trust me and not ask questions. Can you access the security system remotely? Yeah, but that's going to raise flags with, I need you in Warehouse 7 at Pier 52, back entrance, 7:45 p.m. And Frank, if anyone asks, you were never there. Consider it done, brother. The warehouse district at Pier 52 smelled like rust and dead fish. The Delaware River churning black and cold beyond the broken windows. Warehouse 7 loomed against the night sky, 4 stories of corrugated steel and shattered dreams. Marcus pulled up at 7:58 with a duffel bag containing every piece of evidence he'd spent 3 months gathering. Victoria followed 2 minutes later in a car she'd borrowed from Daniel Park, unmarked and unremarkable. They met at the warehouse entrance, the door hanging open like an invitation to hell. Last chance to call this off. Victoria's hand rested on his arm. He has my daughter. Marcus looked at her, memorizing her face in case this went sideways. Thank you for everything, for seeing the truth, for giving me a chance, for being willing to lose your company rather than compromise. Doing the right thing doesn't always feel right at first. Sometimes it feels like the whole world is punishing you. But years from now, when you look back, you'll know you stood for something. Victoria smiled. A very wise man taught me that. They walked into the warehouse together. The interior was exactly what Marcus expected. Concrete floors, rusted support beams, shadows thick enough to hide anything. A single work light illuminated the center of the space, casting everything beyond into darkness. Emma sat in a chair under the light, her hands zip-tied in front of her, her face streaked with tears, but otherwise unharmed. Charlotte stood behind her, confusion and horror warring across her features. Richard Grayson stepped out of the shadows, his silver hair perfect, his suit immaculate despite the surroundings. Mr. Webb, right on time, and Miss Sterling, I specifically said no company. Marcus moved closer, the duffel bag heavy in his hand. Let Emma go. You get the evidence. That was the deal. First, show me what you brought. Marcus unzipped the bag, pulled out hard drives, file folders, thumb drives, everything Richard needed to make the federal case evaporate. It's all here. Every bit of documentation, every witness statement, every financial record. Richard's smile was the expression of someone who'd already won. Excellent. Now destroy it, all of it, while I watch. Not until Emma's free. You're not in a position to negotiate. Richard pulled out a phone, showed Marcus the screen. One call and Emma doesn't come home. Ever. Do as I say. Marcus looked at his daughter, saw her fear and trust mixed together, and felt his heart break and calcify simultaneously. He'd thought he'd do anything for her. Now he knew exactly what anything meant. He pulled a lighter from his pocket, held the flame to the first folder. The paper caught, flames consuming months of investigation, spreading to the next folder, the next. Evidence burning to ash while Richard Grayson watched with satisfaction. Then Marcus spoke, his voice carrying to the shadows where he knew Frank Wilson was positioned, with his phone recording everything. I don't actually need those files, Richard. I sent copies to the FBI this morning. These were just props. Richard's expression shifted from triumph to confusion to rage in 3 seconds. You're lying. Am I? Marcus dropped the burning papers, stepped back. How do you think I knew where you'd be? Pure luck, or maybe I've been working with the FBI since the day they arrested you. The warehouse lights blazed to life, flooding the space with brightness that erased every shadow. FBI agents poured through doors Marcus hadn't known existed, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands to get on the ground. Victoria walked toward Emma, calm and purposeful, while agents surrounded Richard. You were right about one thing, Richard. Some fights have consequences people can't afford. You just picked the wrong fight. Richard's hands were behind his back, cuffed before he could process what was happening. His voice came out strangled. You set me up. We gave you exactly what you wanted, a chance to implicate yourself in kidnapping on top of everything else. Victoria knelt beside Emma, working at the zip ties. Sometimes you have to let someone think they've won before you show them the game was rigged from the start. Charlotte stumbled forward, her face white. I didn't know, I swear, I thought it was legitimate. They called and said Emma was hurt. I just wanted to. The FBI agent nearest to her pulled out handcuffs. Charlotte Reed, you're under arrest for kidnapping and conspiracy. Wait. Marcus's voice cut through the chaos. She didn't know. Richard manipulated her. She's a victim here too. The lead agent, a woman named Torres with 20 years of experience reading situations, studied Charlotte's expression. We'll need a full statement. If your story checks out, we might reduce charges. But you're coming with us. Emma was free, running to Marcus with the force of a missile, her arms wrapping around his waist hard enough to bruise. Marcus dropped to his knees, held his daughter like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to earth. I knew you'd come, Daddy. I knew you wouldn't leave me. Marcus buried his face in Emma's hair, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. Never. I'll never leave you, baby. I promise. Frank Wilson emerged from the shadows, his phone still recording, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Got everything, Marcus. Clear audio, clear video. Richard confessing to kidnapping, threatening Emma, admitting he hired people to make her disappear. Federal prosecutors going to have a field day. Richard was being led away in handcuffs, his perfectly styled hair finely disheveled, his face the color of spoiled meat. He looked back at Marcus with pure hatred. You destroyed me. Marcus stood, Emma in his arms, Victoria beside him, and spoke the truest words he had ever said. No, you destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone saw it. 6 months later, Marcus stood in a Philadelphia courtroom and watched Richard Grayson receive his sentence, 15 years for embezzlement, 10 years for kidnapping to run consecutively. Charlotte received probation and mandatory counseling after her testimony helped prosecutors build an airtight case. The judge's words were clinical and cold, but the mathematics of justice added up to a man who'd spend the next quarter century in a federal prison learning what powerlessness felt like. The employee welfare program Marcus built had expanded across Sterling Global's entire operations. 247 complaints investigated, 11 corrupt managers terminated, 23 wrongfully fired employees reinstated with full back pay and damages. Employee satisfaction ratings climbed from 34% to 78% in 6 months. Turnover dropped by 62%. National news outlets ran features about Sterling Global's transformation. Marcus spoke at conferences about corporate accountability and workers' rights. Victoria testified before Congress about the need for stronger whistleblower protections. Together, they had proven that corporations could change when the people running them actually tried. The relationship between Marcus and Victoria evolved slowly, carefully, two people learning to trust after lives spent being betrayed. They had dinner once a week, sometimes alone, sometimes with Emma. They attended Emma's school plays and parent-teacher conferences together. They talked about everything except what they were becoming to each other, as if naming it might break the spell. On a Thursday evening in late November, Victoria invited Marcus to dinner at her penthouse. Emma was sleeping over at Ruth's apartment, a regular occurrence now that Ruth had become surrogate grandmother to a girl who needed one. The city spread out below them, lights painting patterns against the darkness. They ate Thai food from containers and drank wine that cost more than Marcus used to make in a week. Victoria asked about his plans for expanding the welfare program to other companies. Marcus talked about the consulting requests he'd been receiving, corporations terrified of becoming the next Sterling Global scandal. Then the conversation ran out, and they were left with silence and possibility and the truth they'd been dancing around for months. Victoria set down her wine glass. I never properly thanked you for saving my life. Marcus smiled. You thanked me by saving mine right back. I'd say we're even. Are we? Her voice was soft, uncertain in a way he'd never heard before. Because I think I got the better end of this deal. How so? I gotta see what real courage looks like. Not the kind that comes from power or position, but the kind that comes from doing what's right when everything tells you to walk away. She moved closer. It changed me. You changed me. Marcus reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining. You gave me back my dignity, my daughter, my future. I'd say you changed me too. The kiss was inevitable, gentle, the beginning of something neither of them had been looking for, but both desperately needed. When they pulled apart, Victoria rested her forehead against his. I don't know what we're doing here. Neither do I, Marcus smiled, but I'm willing to find out if you are. They stayed like that for a long time, two people who'd saved each other in different ways, watching Philadelphia breathe below them and feeling like maybe finally they'd found something worth holding on to. Emma's essay for her third-grade class assignment on heroes sat on Marcus's kitchen counter 2 weeks later, written in careful purple crayon. My daddy is my hero because he saved a lady's life when she was dying. Other people just watched, but daddy helped even when they hit him. Then he lost his job and people said bad things about him, but he never gave up. He got sick and Ms. Victoria saved him back. Now he helps lots of people at work so nobody gets treated bad like he was. Daddy says being a hero isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right when everything tells you to walk away. I want to be like that when I grow up. Marcus read it 3 times, his eyes burning with tears he didn't bother hiding. Emma sat across from him, eating cereal, milk dribbling down her chin, oblivious to the weight of her words. It's good, right, Daddy? Marcus pulled her onto his lap, held her close. It's perfect, baby. Just like you. That evening, he stood on his balcony watching Philadelphia settle into night. The city where he'd been invisible, then destroyed, then rebuilt. The city where he'd learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. The city where a janitor making $14 an hour had saved a billionaire's life and somehow impossibly changed both of their worlds. His phone buzzed. Victoria's name on the screen, her text simple. Dinner tomorrow, my place. I'll cook. Marcus smiled and typed back. I didn't know billionaires could cook. You'd be surprised what I'm learning to do. See you at 7. See you at 7. He pocketed his phone and turned his face toward the November wind that smelled like rain and possibility. Emma was safe. His job was real. Victoria was becoming something more than gratitude or partnership. The future spread out before him, uncertain and beautiful, and his to shape. Somewhere in the dark, Philadelphia hummed with life. People heading home, people going to work, people fighting their own battles against systems that wanted them to stay invisible. Marcus had been one of them. Now he was the person fighting to make sure they'd be seen. The journey from invisible to impossible had cost him everything and given him more than he'd known existed. And standing there on his balcony, 40 floors closer to the sky than he'd been 8 months ago, but still firmly rooted in the ground where real people lived real lives, Marcus Webb understood something fundamental about justice. It wasn't a destination you reached. It was a choice you made every single day to see people who'd been erased and fight for those who'd been silenced. He'd made that choice once in a boardroom, risking everything to save a stranger. Now he'd spend the rest of his life making it again and again, because once you'd been invisible, you could never ignore another person's voice crying out from the dark. Marcus went inside, closed the balcony door against the wind, and checked on Emma one last time before bed. She slept peacefully, her teddy bear clutched tight, her dreams untouched by nightmares for the first time in months. He stood in her doorway and made her a promise she couldn't hear, but he'd keep anyway. She'd grow up in a world where doing the right thing didn't mean losing everything, where courage was rewarded instead of punished, where being seen didn't require permission from people who'd rather you stayed invisible. It would take work. It would take years. It would cost more than he could imagine. But Marcus had learned something important in the 8 months since he'd knelt on a marble floor and refused to let someone die. The hardest battles were always worth fighting, especially when you were the only one willing to fight them. He turned off Emma's light, walked to his own room, and slept the sleep of people who had found their purpose and refused to let it go. The story wasn't over. But for the first time in his life, Marcus Webb was writing it himself instead of letting other people write it for him. And that made all the difference.